Hello everybody and welcome back to Vehicles of War Thunder. Sorry, it's been a little while since the last one of these videos. I've had some interruptions to my ability to sit down and record. The script itself had basically been done for a while. I just hadn't really had time to sit down and be able to actually record the background footage. This background footage, it should be noted, was recorded prior to me upgrading my GPU. And rather than spend forever trying to go and get a couple more good matches after having upgraded my GPU, which significantly improves my ability to record War Thunder without stutters, I basically said screw it, let's just go ahead and use this footage. But in future videos, the background footage will improve significantly in terms of quality because it'll be a lot less stuttering. With that out of the way, in this episode we are going to be covering another American tank with the M3 light tank. As a reminder, the M3 Stewart is basically a straight up successor to the M2 light tank that we've covered previously. As a result, we'll be skipping over basically the entire M2 light tank part of the history. If you want to know that bit, go and watch the video on the M2. And so we're just going to go ahead and fast forward to the design of the M3 Stewart itself. The initial models of the M3 were a simple upgrade of the M2A4 with a more powerful Continental petrol engine, a new vertical volute spring suspension system, or VVSS obviously for short, and up to 5 30 caliber machine guns. Sometimes, in order to save weight however and free space, the 2 sponson machine guns would be removed, in addition to a main quick-firing M5 and then a later M6 37mm anti-tank gun with a new recoil system. The M3 worked well when used as an infantry support or reconnaissance vehicle, but it was outmatched by many medium tanks in short order. The M3 is protected by rolled homogeneous steel armor with a thickness of about 1 inch on the sides and rear, half an inch for the top plate, and 1.5 inches on the front of the hull. The turret is 1.5 inches thick on the front plate and 1.25 inches on the vertical sides. The more powerful engine used on the M3 is either the Continental Static Radial W670 Series 9A, developing 250 horsepower at 2400 RPM, or in the case of the British Stuart 2 and 4, the Guberson Radial Diesel T1020. Series 4, developing 250 horsepower at 2,200 RPM. The M3 had a max speed on smooth roadways of 31 miles an hour or 20 miles an hour across country. It also has a max range of 75 miles if using the Continental gasoline engine or 90 if using the Guberson diesel engine, with a miles per gallon of about 2 miles and 3.5 miles respectively. The M3 is crewed by 4 people, a driver, co-driver, gunner, and commander. Now for some variants for this design. The M3 was the first production model, most of which were provided to the British and other Commonwealth forces through the Lend-Lease program. Some immediately saw action in North Africa, where they became popular for their speed, sturdiness, and reliability. The official British designation was Stewart, a homage to Civil War Confederate General J.E.B. Stewart. It was affectionately dubbed Honey by the troops because the tank provided such a smooth ride. The nickname, however, did not take off in the United States. The first production M3 was delivered in March 1941, with 5,811 being produced, including 1,285 equipped with the Guberson diesel engine, which was a British specification for use in desert operations. These models would be referred to as the Stewart 2. In May 1942, the M3A1 was introduced, which improved the turret design. Starting with this design, the sponson machine guns were removed from all models, as the 3 remaining machine guns were deemed sufficient. The vertical stabilizer was also improved. A total of 4,621 M3A1s were produced, with the last being delivered in February 1943. They were largely distributed to the British under the Stewart 3 designation, and of course those that used the diesel engine were designated as Stewart 4s. The following are some specialized variants. Starting with American ones, you have the T-18 Howitzer motor carriage, which was a proposed design that would use the chassis of the M3, but mount a 75mm M1A1 pack howitzer in a box superstructure. The project of this variant started in September 1941 and was abandoned in April 1942, with only 2 being produced. The 75mm howitzer motor carriage M8 was chosen to be produced instead. The T-56 3-inch gun motor carriage was a self-propelled gun based on the M3A3 chassis. The engine was moved to the middle of the hull, and a 3-inch gun M1918 was mounted in a superstructure in the rear. The project started in September 1942 and was abandoned in February 1943. The T-57 3-inch gun motor carriage was a variant of the T-56 that used the Continental engine of the medium tank M3. The project was also dropped in February 1943. The M3 with Maxim turret was an anti-aircraft variant developed in 1942 and was armed with 4 50 caliber machine guns in a turret developed by Maxim Corporation. The project was rejected, however, because of the availability of the M16 MGMC.
Most of the zones are under control.
The M3/M5 command tank replaced the turret with a small superstructure with a 50 caliber machine gun. As evidenced by the name, this was intended as being just that, a command tank. It was not meant to be right up in the front lines fighting, necessarily. The M3 with T2 light mine exploder was developed in 1942, but was rejected, but beyond that my sources don't provide any real information on this variant, but it being a mine exploder, it's pretty obvious what its use case would have been. The M3/M3A1 with Ronson Flamethrower was a variant that replaced the main gun with the Ronson Flamethrower. 24 tanks were converted by the Chemical Warfare Service Flame Tank Group Seabees for the United States Marine Corps in 1943. The M3A1 with E5R1 M3 flame gun was a variant that replaced the hull machine gun with a flamethrower. Now moving on to some specialized British variants, you have the Stewart Reese, which was a reconnaissance vehicle based on a turretless Stewart. You also have the Stuart Kangaroo, which was an armored personnel carrier conversion of the M3 and M5. The Stewart Command was a Stuart Kangaroo with some extra radios. And the Stewart Artillery Tractor was another turretless design, which was used to tow the Ordnance QF 17-pounder anti-tank gun. Now into some other unique variants from other countries. In the 1970s, the Brazilian company, and I'm going to butcher this name, Bernardini, developed a series of Stewart upgrades for the Brazilian Army. The first was the X1A, which was based on the M3A1 and had a new engine, a 280 horsepower Saab Scania diesel, improved suspension, new upper hull armor, fire controls, and DEFA 90mm gun in a new turret. 80 units were produced. The X1A1 further improved the suspension with 3 bogies instead of 2 on each side and a raised idler. The X1A2 was based on the X1A1 and retained almost nothing of the original Stewart, even redesigning the hull. The vehicle weighed 17 metric tons, a crew of 3 was armed with a 90mm gun, and it was powered by a 300 horsepower Saab Scania diesel engine. 30 were produced between 1979 and 1983. Yugoslav partisans also had access to the Stewart, mostly from the British Army. By 1945, the tank was, as far as anybody concerned, obsolete, and so many were modified to carry specialized armaments. Some of these included carrying 81mm mortars, 7.5cm Pak 40s, 4, and I'm going to butcher this name, Flakverling 38s, 7.5cm Pak 50s, or 15cm SLG 33s. Now for how the Stewart actually performed in service. U.S. forces used many during the first major operation in the West during Operation Torch in November 1942. The tank proved successful against Italian tanks, but they were susceptible to German 88mm artillery and the upgunned Panzer IIIs and IVs. It was made clear that the high-profile and flat squared hull was too vulnerable. The M3A2 was a paper-only design to use an entirely welded hull. The upgrade to the M3A1, however, instead ended up coming in the form of the M3A3, Stewart Mark V in British service. This design benefited from improvements in hull design that were introduced with the M5 light tank. The main feature was a 20-degree sloped and thickened welded hull, which greatly improved survivability. This model was slightly heavier, but also easier to produce than the original model. The M3A3 hull was also roomier, and this space was used to add more fuel and ammo storage. 3,427 units would be produced, the last one leaving the factory in October 1943. Through the year 1943, all regular units operated the M3 only as scouts, and they were gradually replaced by the improved M5 light tanks. For how the M3 handled in battle historically, during Operation Crusader during the North Africa campaign, the M3 regularly went up against Panzer IIIGs and Italian M1340s. The former was comparable to the M3 in speed and armor, while the latter was slower and less well armed and armored than the M3, and was able to be easily penetrated by the M3 even at ranges of 1,000 meters, while being unable to penetrate the front hull or turret armor of the M3 at 1,000 meters. These early operations revealed several faults with the M3, however, with most British complaints mentioning the 37mm M5 gun and a poor internal layout. The two main turret crew was also considered a weakness, resulting in some British units attempting to fight with a three-man turret crew. The range of the Stewart was also lackluster, particularly for the highly mobile desert warfare, that resulted in many units often outpacing their supplies and being left stranded when they ran out of fuel. The British, however, did like that the M3 had a relatively high speed and was mechanically reliable, especially compared to the Crusader tank, which comprised a large portion of the British tank forces in Africa up until 1942. The Crusader had a similar armament and armor as the M3, but was slower, less reliable, several tons heavier, and lacked high explosive shells, limiting its usefulness against emplaced anti-tank guns and infantry. On the Eastern Front, the Soviet Union was less happy with the tank, considering it to be undergunned, under-armored, likely to catch fire, and too sensitive to fuel quality. Because the M3 used a radial aircraft engine that required high-octane fuel, this complicated Soviet logistics as most of their tanks used diesel or low-octane fuel. High fuel consumption also led to a poor range characteristic, especially for use as a reconnaissance vehicle. Because the M3 used a narrower track than Soviet tanks that resulted in higher ground pressure, the M3 was also more likely to get stuck in the Rasputina muddy conditions of spring, autumn, and winter snow conditions of the Eastern Front. The Soviets did try the M5 in 1943, but decided the upgraded design was not much better than the M3, and with the Soviet Union being less desperate than in 1941, decided to turn down an American offer to supply the M5. The M3 stayed in service with the Red Army until at least 1944. In the Pacific, the United States Army, because they did exist to an extent in the Pacific, though it was mostly Marines, deployed 108 M3s in the Philippines in September 1941, equipping both the 194th and 192nd Tank Battalions. The first United States tank-on-tank combat to occur in World War II began on December 22nd, 1941. The M3 proved to be an effective armored vehicle for fighting in the jungle environments of the Pacific. When the United States entered the war in 1941, they started supplying China with tanks, including the M3 Stewart, which trickled in through Burma. Although the M3 proved to be affected, by late 1943, the United States Marine Corps were replacing their M3 and M5 light tanks with M4 medium tanks. On December 9th, 1944, the 759th Tank Battalion advanced on a hill near Bogheim, probably mispronounced that, but was subjected to a counterattack by German forces that included a heavy self-propelled assault gun that took over 100 direct hits, according to my sources, at ranges as low as 69 meters with no appreciable damage. In January 1945, General Eisenhower received a report that concluded the M3 was obsolete in every respect as a fighting tank. Because of these limitations of both the main gun and armor, the M3 didn't perform well in combat roles in Western Europe, and so light tank companies were often paired with cavalry reconnaissance units, used for guarding or screening, used in supply or even messenger roles for medium tank units. Now for how it actually performs in War Thunder. I'm mostly going to be talking about the M3/Stewart 1 and the M3A1/Stewart 3, because in War Thunder they don't actually use the diesel Stewarts in the British tech tree because of reasons. Because those are the ones I played, or at least the ones I played the most of. I dabbled a little bit with the M3A3. I don't think the changes for it really affect my impression too much of the tank as a whole, or rather the tank series as a whole. So I didn't spend too much time with it. The M3 Stewart is probably one of my favorite low-tier tanks, particularly of a light tank variety, that I've actually checked out as part of this series. It has a good gun, can carry quite a bit of ammo, and that this BR isn't really all that likely to get one-shotted because of ammo racks all that often. You will get one-shotted inevitably, because a lot of the countries you fight will have rounds with explosive fillers, except for the British. Well, that's not strictly true. The British do have some, as noted when we did the A13 remake, but a lot of the British tanks don't have rounds with explosive fillers, and that really hampers their ability to kill stuff. So you will get one-shotted because of crew knockouts and whatnot, but not necessarily because of ammo racks in my experience. The tank is also very fast and nimble, allowing you to be able to get to those flanking spots that many of the maps have because of Gaijin map design being what it is. Often much faster than any of your enemies will be able to actually do that, because at low tier, a lot of the countries actually have very slow tanks. You know, you take a look at something like the T-26 that the Soviets and the Chinese get as some of their reserve tanks. And you notice that they're just so damn slow. They really are. So, yeah, you're going to be able to get to those flanking spots often well before most enemies will be able to even be expecting somebody to be there, realistically. As a result of that, you can potentially rack up a fair few kills before you really start taking any serious fire in return. However, you won't really see that so much in the footage, and that's partly because, well, one, as mentioned at the start, it's going to be stuttering quite a bit, and I apologize for that, but in the future that won't be as big of an issue. But the main reason for that, realistically, is because of my playstyle. I'm not really a flank and camp bush kind of guy, so I tend to sort of be in the thick of the combat. That's where I find the game to be most enjoyable, is in the thick of it. And I don't really find going out to the outer edges of the map and whatnot and shooting the enemy in the side to be in the thick of it. You will rack up a ton of kills, depending on the vehicle you're playing in, of course, before the enemies react. But it's not my playstyle, so you're not really going to see that much in my gameplay. Another reason for this is, of course, also that at low tier you have the problem of fairly bad teamwork. It's not the worst, however, because for some reason War Thunder seems to have an inverse effect of battle rating on how helpful your team is at the whole teamwork thing. People at low tier are much more likely to help each other than people at higher tiers, in my experience. I don't know why it works that way, but for some reason, the longer people play the game, the less they seem to understand teamwork. I don't know why, it just is that way. I could go on to a tangent about some of the absolutely brain-dead things that I've seen, but that's not related to this video, so I'm not going to do that. I may in the future make a rant video where I basically just moan and groan about how terrible people are at War Thunder. But I don't know if I will do that. But at the very least, I'm not going to talk about it here all that much. But that is it for how it performs in War Thunder. Again, I think it is a great low-tier tank. It really is. Even the slightly higher ones. Like I said, I did dabble a little bit with the M3A3. The M3A3, however, runs into an issue of its rounds are kind of hot garbage at their battle rating for a lot of stuff. In fact, I actually had a situation on... I think the map's called Finland or whatever. It's one of those snowy maps. The A cap, I believe it is the one on this map. Is like way out along like a frozen coastline type thing. I believe the name of the map is Finland, but don't quote me on that. I might be misremembering. But either way, I had a situation on that map where I was in the M3A3. I think it was the French one. And I was on one of the hills around the B cap, and I was shooting down at a German KV. I don't recall if it was a KV-1 or a KV-2. My rounds just would not penetrate the turret. The sides and rear of the turret. I don't know how that makes any sense, because I'm pretty sure the round does have like just enough penetration to be able to do that. But I couldn't pen them. I don't know why. So yeah, like I said, if I had a complaint with the higher battle rating M3s, it would be that the rounds are kind of hot garbage at the battle ratings that they sit at. But beyond that, the M3 as a platform, I think, is actually a very good platform. I really do. But yeah. Now, I don't know what we'll be covering next time. I'm thinking either a Japanese, Italian, or French tank. I'm kind of in a tank mood, to be honest, so probably going to be a little while until I cover another aircraft. But like I said, I don't know who we'll be covering next time. I'll figure that out by the time we have the next video, obviously. So that's going to be it for this video. I will see you all next time. If you want to stay up to date with the channel, I would highly recommend that you join the Discord server. You can find a link to that down below in the description. That is my go-to place for posting about channel happenings. I don't generally bother posting elsewhere, so if you want to know what's going on with the channel, join the Discord. If you found yourself enjoying this video or any other video on the channel, then please leave it a like. And if it's within your means, maybe consider supporting the channel financially, either via Patreon if you want to do it monthly and get some goodies back in exchange, such as early access to videos, or Streamlabs, especially if you want to do just the one-time donation/tip. But Streamlabs does also support monthly, but you do not get any goodies. You just get the warm, fuzzy feeling that, generally speaking, more of the money you give actually makes it to the channel. Because what middlemen do exist via the via the Streamlabs route, they take smaller cuts in Patreon. So, yeah. But that'll be it for this video. Like I said, I'll see you all next time. Until then, goodbye and farewell.